Well, guess what? Today's Thursday, and it is another day for Let's Talk Power Live. And I'm excited to be here today. I think it's the beginning of spring. We have already bypassed or gone into daylight savings time and we sprang forward. I don't know if you're like me, but those first couple of days really send my system for a loop. My circadia is off, my rhythm is off, and I oversleep and miss some things. But I'm here, I'm on time this week, and I'm so grateful. I'm grateful because each week I come to you and you let me chat about Let's Talk Power. I choose to talk about power in education because it is a real thing. And there are a lot of conversations. You probably hear things like, in the real world, we want young people to have quote unquote real world experiences. And I talk about power because power is real in education, it is real in every relationship. The dynamics are unmistakable. And because of so many factors, the adult student relationship in education is ripe for the use, misuse, and outright abuse of power. I've seen it, and we have countless conversations and countless pieces of evidence where the environment in which young people are learning is disenfranchising and toxic. And so it's really important for me to bring the conversation of power to the forefront and provide educators at every level, from the state level all the way to the classroom level, to bring forth operational strategies to, number one, identify the power structures that are creating disenfranchisement, and then provide strategies and moves, ways in which they can take that knowledge and then create an environment that fosters authentic agency building, where students begin to learn how to strategically use that which is innately in them to get to a place where they are empowered and making decisions on their own behalf. So that's why I talk about power all the time. It matters, and it really does have impact on the way in which young people learn. So, what am I thankful for today? I'm thankful that we're here. I'm thankful that we're moving towards spring. I love the spring. I love the summer. And I'm looking forward to that time period where I can get back on the bike and get back into running again. I don't like to do it in the cold. So I like to do it when it's a little bit warmer and we're headed in that direction. So every week I ask a series of questions. My first question to you is, do you have the book? Do you have Understanding Your Instructional Power? Recently had the opportunity to talk to a building leader whose team decided that they wanted to do this book study. And what they did was they found that once they began reading through the book and implementing some of the strategies and the practices in there, their environment changed. They couldn't see things the way they used to. It's like the toothpaste is out of the tube and you can't put it back. Just finished up, I think last week, yeah, last week with an organization in the UK called Whole Education. They invited me to come and share. They had purchased a set of the books and they wanted to do an author talk. And they reached out and we had a wonderful conversation about how to build authentic student agency using the principles in the book. One of their findings was, after we think about COVID here in the States, well, they had COVID issues in their country as well. And they found that once they really began to think strategically, inviting students into authentic conversations around how to be actively involved in their learning environment, a lot of the challenges they were facing, i.e., discipline, meaning misbehavior or behavior that is outside the expected norm or the expectations of the adults in buildings, they found a reduction in that. They found an increase in students coming to school. What one of the ladies said to me, she said, our kids come to school, they come to the building. What they found was that young people were simply cutting class and just hanging out in hallways, in stairways, on the campus, just weren't going to class. And they found that really inviting young people into authentic conversations around their learning, they began to see a decrease in young people just being stray in the hallways, and they saw an increase in them actively involving in the classrooms. And so I say all that to say that's what happens when you read the book. So, as a building leader, as maybe a literacy or content coach, or even if you are a teacher who wants to get on a journey of discovery on your own, this is definitely the book for you. You will have your eyes open. And if you want to get a signed copy, that QR code will help you get a signed copy. And I look forward to being in conversation with you. So we're going to go ahead and get started. As I talk about power, one thing we understand, power is not given, right? Power is built. It takes strategic work. And in Women's History Month, like I did last month in Black History Month, I wanted to focus this month on some really powerful women. And last week, I talked about Mary Church Terrell. And I know we had some technical difficulties with the word, with some of the sound, and I might be doing a recording. So I'll let you know if I do a recording on that. But this week, I want to talk about this giant in education and politics. And she leaves such an incredible blueprint for us to follow on how to build power in a strategic, long lasting, legacy leaving manner. So, Dorothy Height, one of the things she said, we have to improve life, not just for those who have the most skills and those who know how to manipulate the system, but also for, and most importantly is my words, not her words, but most importantly, with those who often have so much to give, but never get the opportunity. We're living in times where those who have so much to give are systemically and systematically having the door shut on opportunity. So I wanted to lean into Dorothy Height this week and really bring to life her strategy, what she did to build and leave this blueprint for us. So who was Dorothy Height? She was born in 1912, right? Got my time right? Yep. She was born in 1912 in Richmond, Virginia. What was going on in our world? Dorothy Height was born into a segregated country. If you know anything about Virginia, Virginia was one of the staunchest segregated states, highly restrictive, highly discriminatory. I About 3 years ago, I was headed to a conference in Pennsylvania for an organization that I worked with, and I drove the back way. It doesn't really matter, but I actually drove past the Mason-Dixon line from Virginia into Pennsylvania. So Dorothy Height was born into a time where there was such demarcation that you had to change train cars once you passed that thing called the Mason-Dixon line. So born in 1912, Richmond, Virginia, she goes to NYU in 1932, Steinhardt School, studies education, and then embarks on this life that is profoundly shaped by what she saw in her town, in her life. She learned about Ida B. Wells. She learned about Mary McLeod Bethune. In high school, she began to become active against anti-lynching. So you can't tell me that schools don't matter, right? Schools matter, which is why they're under such attack. We'll talk about that soon. Dorothy Height began this life of leadership and activism in a way to impact her community. So she does that. She becomes the president of Delta Sigma Theta Sorority Incorporated. Shout out to my sorors. Let me get that right. Shout out to my sorors. In 1946, 47, and does that for nearly 10 years. Then she begins one of the not most important, but she did so many things, right? And it's hard to like pull out all the stuff. But she also met Eleanor Roosevelt in the 40s, in the mid late 40s. And she worked to desegregate the YMCA. That's profound. If you live in a place where the YMCA was a crucial part of your community where people can come and, gather, take courses, be safe, she worked to desegregate that institution. That's huge. So, she champions anti-lynching. She works to desegregate the YWCA. She becomes president of Delta Sigma Theta. Then she institutes and starts the National Council for Negro Women that is still in operation today. Just an incredible legacy, living legacy when she was alive, but the idea of leaving a legacy once your physical life is over. So that is why I chose this quote. She has tons and tons of quotes, but I chose this quote of hers because of the times in which we live. And building power right now really is going to take some strategic moves. I think the good news is that particularly as an African American community, we have been here before. We understand for those of us that are really leaning into the times through the lens of history. In February, I started the series was the power in history. Those of us who are really leaning into the power in history, we recognize that where we are today, the strategies that the other side is using, those strategies were inevitable. They were going to happen because history has a nasty way of repeating itself, particularly when you think about how we teach history in this country. We teach it through a lens of sort of disparate facts. Now, there are organizations working together to really try to dispel that and disrupt that way of teaching so that young people can learn history through an understanding of the multiplicity and the complexity of time. So in 1906, we had extreme segregation in this country. But at the same time, a group of young men, a group of young Black men at Cornell started the Alpha Phi Alpha fraternity. So we have these two seemingly opposing systems one system is underway and full throttle, and then another system of organizing in the face of that taking hold, right? And so looking at the power in history gives us a blueprint by which we can navigate this current situation. I will say, and maybe because I'm me and I'm my age, this feels more insidious to me because I didn't know I didn't live through the other time period in a real way. What's interesting though is I was born at the tail end of desegregation. This country has only had legal desegregation for my specific lifetime. That blows my mind. And the fact that we teach history in such a way as young people begin to believe that the 60s, the civil rights movement was such a long time ago, is a disservice to their ability to be complex, critical thinkers. So let's begin to think about how do we look at Dorothy Height and her way of building power as a blueprint for us to move forward in these challenging times. So she had a strategy. She did, right? So number one, she looked at strategic positioning. And I'm going to go through each of these separately, but I wanted to give you this up front. She had strategic positioning. She had strategic partnerships. She had strategic leveraging. She used strategic leveraging, and then she was strategically consistent. Those four ways of understanding how to build power is this blueprint for us to navigate these really challenging times. So let's go ahead and look at each one of these separately. So, first of all, strategic positioning. I'm a Hamilton fan. We can talk about that later. I've seen Hamilton 4 times and can see another 40 and would still love every moment of it. One of the key issues that Aaron Burr had was that he wasn't in the room where it happened. And he just kept wanting to be in the room where it happened. So, one of the things that Dorothy Height did was she was in the room where it happened. And then she also created rooms where it could happen. So you got to do both, right? So actionable steps. And a lot of times in education, we talk a lot about what educators in classrooms can do, and that is correct, but it's also incomplete. There really has to be a strategic, a thoughtful, a specific conversation with leaders in this time period. And I'm going to talk about that soon because I do have a way that we're going to really talk to leaders in this time period and support leaders in this time period. But strategic positioning is about identifying key decision making tables. Where are those? Who sits at them? Where are the tables, right? In your district, in your state, at the national policy level. There are tables, and we know this, right? We know this because if we go back 3 years ago to the false fight that Christopher Rufo started regarding critical race theory, he created a table, a space where wholesale groups of people began to believe a lie. And he said it was a lie. He was not playing. He said he was going to make it up, and he made it up. And yet he got all these people to believe him. And they sat around, they became key decision makers at school board meetings, in their council meetings, at their state levels, that have changed the landscape of the way, of not just the way, but what young people are beginning to learn. So tables exist, and we've got to, as leaders, know where they are and who sits at them, right? And if you're not in the room, allies, you have people who can influence the agenda. And sometimes you can't physically be in a room for lots and lots and lots of reasons. But that doesn't mean you don't find the friends who can be in these rooms with you. And then position yourself as an indispensable source, right? So if you can't go in the room, get the data, right? Have the solutions, be part of the policy discussions. Because as a leader, you create the conditions under which young people are beginning to learn. And right now, the conditions are really challenging in some places. So it's really important to think about where are the rooms where things are happening, and how are the things, and I don't, that word is, whatever. How are what's happening in those rooms going to impact your learning environment in both direct and indirect ways? And find a way to get into those rooms. And if you can't get into those rooms directly, get into those rooms tangentially by finding the right partners to be there. So then what else? Strategic partnerships, cross-sector coalitions. This hinges and connects right to the positioning piece. So partner with parents. We talk a lot about one of the things that came out of what's been happening at the school board level and city council levels is that this group of parents has been advocating for parents' rights, right? They are making cross-sector coalitions to advance parents' rights. But the parental rights that they are advocating for are not for every child. They're advocating for policies and practices that favor a narrow group because they're not inclusive. And I'm going to use the word inclusive because the word inclusive is a real thing. They're not including the vast majority of parents in their districts. They have created their own table. So now in this new landscape that we're in, and I'm not going to say it's new, it's not new. It is a revision of ongoing structures that systematically disenfranchise groups. But I'm saying this cross-sector coalition building because coalition building is going to be a critical disruptor. We're going to have to find people and build coalitions with the community, with parents, with community organizations, with local businesses. Education impacts local businesses. Those are going to be some critical partners that are going to be important structures, important relationships around which to disrupt these harmful practices that are making our young people less intellectually capable of being prepared to enter a workforce that is highly diverse. Diversity is not an issue. Diversity simply is. The question about diversity is, do you want every person to be included and know they belong? Those are the questions. So right now, one of the biggest strategic action steps is really to be looking for building coalitions across a multiplicity of aisles. Next, work with historically excluded groups to ensure there is authentic representation, right? That it becomes a reality despite these pushbacks. Representation matters. I do a lot of work with publishing companies, curriculum material companies, educational material companies. And the question I ask them is, who is on the page? But then more importantly, how are they there? What is the subtle message that is being sent by the way in which groups of people, individual people, and topics are represented? So in this day and age, and I keep saying so, and I got to check myself. This is me being a speaker right now. Right now, in this time period, really looking at the representation of people, of places, and of topics is critical. And it is imperative that the representation is balanced in order for groups to know they are valued, they matter, and their opinions and their needs are as important as a dominant culture group. We tend to marginalize groups, particularly those groups who are not able to show up in ways in which the dominant culture values. That happens a lot in schools. I remember when our children were in school in North Carolina, they used to have our annual holiday service in the middle of the afternoon at 3 o'clock, 2 o'clock. And I wrote to the headmaster and I said, it appears as though you only want a targeted group of people to attend these gatherings because the bulk of your parents are working parents. Yeah, I'm sure you had a time period when a lot of parents could come during the day, but a lot of parents in that school worked. And lo and behold, through that advocacy, they changed the time frame. And let me tell you what happened. They had such an outpouring of support. They had to then switch it to more than one because so many more parents were able to come and support their kids, which means that the lesson there is if we say we want involvement, do we want people to truly be involved? Or do we just want them to participate? And we must ask that question because in this time period, having the voices of the many is really going to be a strategic partnership building practice. It really is important. And then you have to form alliances. It is really critical to form alliances across the aisle, asking critical questions, making sure that we're really being curious, that we're really examining our own needs and what we say we want for young people. And then let's talk about strategic leveraging. Dorothy Height strategically leveraged her influence and her resources, right? What does that mean? In our time period, we can use social media, our community meetings, amplify voices, advocating for educational justice. We in this day and age, if you say equity, they're going to ding you. They might decide that, well, because you're using that word, you're being exclusionary. Equity is a real word. It lives in the dictionary. The markets, the actual financial markets use the word equity. So if they can use the word equity in financial markets, we must take back that word and use it in educational spaces so that every child gets the excellent education they deserve, the one we say we want them to have. And next, use data as a storytelling tool. Create compelling arguments for policy change and funding, and then strategically deploy your influence to mitigate the impact of this crisis. We have a blueprint. Dorothy Height was strategic in her influences. She was in the right rooms, and then she created a room. And she was constantly consistent. She was strategically consistent. She stayed consistent. This fight against these attacks on education are ongoing. I don't know if you remember, if you joined me a few weeks back, I showed you and told you President Carter got Congress to approve the Department of Education. From the moment that Congress approved it, forces were marshaling to undo it. And Congress has been able to stand firm and keep the Department of Education intact. We're at a crucial time when what they're doing is taking it apart from the inside out. I was in Ghana last summer and we went to the botanical gardens and they showed us the invasive ficus tree. And what the invasive ficus tree does is it wraps itself. The vines start out almost innocuously, and they wrap themselves around a tree, and they begin to suffocate the tree in such a way as it eats the tree away from the inside out. That's what's happening right now. Our educational system is being eaten by a suffocating ficus tree from the inside out, to the point where when this process is done, much like the tree that the ficus engulfs, there will be just a shell. They've already started slashing 1,300 jobs. So we want to make sure that we understand this fight is ongoing. It started from the very moment that President Carter instituted it. They have been putting bills forth and bills forth and bills forth. The struggle for Black equality in this country, the equality of people of color, is an ongoing fight. All you have to do is march yourself through history and you will see it. So that is why strategic consistency matters. Develop long-term advocacy plans, mentor and train future leaders. This fight is going to go on beyond us. It is going to go, it's going to abate, and it might come back. We are at a time where we have to decide whether this fight stops now or it's going to continue. And then stay vocal and engaged in the process. We must stay engaged in the process because it's going to keep going. It will not end. And what they're banking on is strategic. They're being strategic. They're using strategic chaos. Every time you look around, something new, something new, something new. Strategic chaos. I'm old enough to have this term, the okie doke. Don't fall for the okie doke. Don't let this strategic chaos get us off course and back away from what we know is right. So the final thoughts. What must we do? Dorothy Height's strategy wasn't just about fighting battles. It was about winning the war for justice, right? That's what it was about. And playing the long game. What must we do? Think strategically, build coalitions, act wisely, and stay the course. We must stay the course and do not fall for the okie doke by leaning into the strategic chaos that is underway. So that's today's conversation about Let's Talk Power Live. How do I end every week? Got some great news. I'm so excited about this. If you have joined me for Deconstructing the Silent Curriculum, our next session's coming up April 16th. The information is going to be forthcoming. We're doing some dynamic stuff, really going to come forth with some tools and strategies to help you navigate the strategically chaotic times that we live. So looking forward to sharing that with you coming up. Get your book. There's the QR code. Get your book. Would love to be in conversation. And here's what I offer people. When you get a set of books, and a set of books is usually 30 books or more, 30 to 35 books. When you get a set of books, I will be happy to join you for a free author talk. Would love to do that with your school district, your leadership schools, any place where you know that power is living and it's living everywhere. Join you for an author talk when you decide that, you know what, we're going to do this for our whole school. All right, folks, thank you so much. We will see you next week. Let's keep talking. You know, that's how we get together. Those are the ways in which we can continue to chat and talk this situation through. Have a fabulous, thankful Thursday, everyone. We will see you next week.